Hello and welcome to this video on flying and everything that comes with it. My name is Guy and today of course we unpack this rather tricky subject. Flight. How do we handle it? Well, first of all, let's unpack it from its expectations perspective. When we talk flying, we expect things like easy movement. You're in a 360-degree environment. You can fly up, you can fly down, you can fly left, you can fly right in general. You can fly over things, you can fly around things. So there is that ease of movement that comes with flight. We expect aerial combat. We somehow expect us as the GMs, as the dungeon masters, as the narrators to figure out how on earth you conduct aerial combat. Now, space fighters and dogfights from World War I and II, and later, of course, all allow jets to zoom around and do 180 or 360-degree barrel turns and the like. Can you do the same thing on a flying carpet? Do you fall off? Or do you require centrifugal force to keep you on the carpet as you do a barrel roll whilst firing or fireballs? Do verbal spells work whilst you are flying through the air? Does the spell need to be built out of the actual words that you're using? Because if you're travelling at 100 miles an hour and your words are spewing out behind you, does the spell sort of play out as this wispy lengthened thing? Does the Doppler effect affect magic? All these kinds of things. We expect aerial creatures. Now that's where it gets fun. We expect harpies, we expect angels, we expect sky whales, we expect the unexpected, we expect crows, we expect eagles, we expect manta rays, we expect all kinds of aerial creatures to engage in this aerial combat. We expect falling. That is a real risk. We expect falling. And we expect some kind of repercussion for falling and some way, miraculous as it might be, to survive falling. And that's something that we're going to have to look at, and we will look at quite carefully later on in the video. We also expect our descriptions to change. Our point of view has now changed. We're now looking down on the planet's surface. We need to change the way that we describe things to create that element, that sense of being above and looking down. So those are all the things that we expect. How now do we then unpack them into something that is usable? Well, let's look at that ease of movement. Moving around with flight is arguably a lot easier than moving around on land. On land, you have to go around boulders, you have to ford rivers, and when you come to a chasm, you have to climb across it, or climb down it, cross it, and then climb back up the other side and carry on your journey. Flying is a lot easier. The implication, however, for us as the game masters, is that the characters are avoiding encounters with terrestrial-based NPCs. They're avoiding visual clues. They avoid terrain. They avoid potential plots that are not in the air. And there are a lot of things that are not in the air. When you fly over a village, you don't notice the farmer down there who happens to be sitting scratching his head, wondering what to do about his exploding cows. You just fly over them. Now, if you're sharp, you'll have the players fly over a field in which there are a lot of exploded, red, bloody carcasses everywhere. That hopefully will get them attracted into your adventure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it definitely will. You can't have the carcasses fly up to the characters. Characters can avoid enemies. Oh, there's an enemy I don't want to face. I fly up into the air. It's a bunch of orcs. They're not armed with arrows, and even if they are, an arrow can only get to about 60 foot up into the air before it starts to be pulled down again, so I fly at 200 foot above the ground. Now what you going to do? So ease of movement also means lack of engagement. And that's something that you need to think about. You can't have messengers arrive on wings every single time you want the players to be engaged. So if your party has somehow managed to get themselves airborne, maybe they're a bunch of druids and they all turn into birds, or they have Pegasi, or they have a flying carpet or a flying ship, you need to figure out how to get the characters engaged. I cheated in my game that I run on the Bacon RPG YouTube channel, where my characters have got a flying ship. They also happen to have an intelligent telepathic oracle who receives the quests from the terrain, from the ground-based individuals, and can then take my people from their ship up in the sky down onto the ground. I also try and make sure that a lot of the environment, the encounters happen on the ground rather than up in the air. So there's some aerial combat and that sort of thing. Absolutely. It's an airship. It should happen. But a lot of the actual adventures are ground-based, so I take them out of that space. If you can't take them out of that space, that's when you're going to have to start getting creative. And if flight is something that is rare in your world, you're going to have to get really creative in order to get those messages through to them. Now, when we look at aerial combat, there are a lot of things that need to be taken into account. And the very first one is frustration. We are playing a game that is an imaginatory game. We are trying to figure out a way in which aerial combat can be cool and exciting. Frustration sets in when we start to get bogged down in the mathematics, in the mechanics, or when we have terrestrial-based players and airborne-based players, and the monsters are airborne. A terrestrial-based warrior who wields a great axe is useless against a flying harpy if the harpy stays at a distance and uses a bow and arrow to shoot the warrior. You could argue that any archer is going to pose a warrior who has limited range a problem. Yes, but you can run towards them. You can run them down if they're based on the ground. If they're in the air, they simply fly away. They found a mountain to fly around, and the barbarian cannot get to their prey. So frustration is going to be something that you have to look at with aerial combat in the very first instance. How is everybody going to be able to participate? Or how am I going to keep those who are not participating engaged in something? They need to do something. Otherwise, they're going to be sitting there waiting for the aerial combat to finish with nothing to do. This is something that you need to take into account when you're wanting to add in aerial combat into your game. What is everybody going to do? And if you don't have a plan for everybody, you need to think harder. You need to think more. Aerial combat is also technically very difficult. Now, there are videos out there, some very good GMs have tackled the subject of aerial combat, and they've talked about Euclidean geometry and non-Euclidean geometry and all those fancy, wonderful mathematical terms that someone like me, who barely got through mathematics in high school, knows nothing about. So how do you calculate if the harpy is 10 foot away and 10 foot up in the air? How far away is it from the character on the ground? Well, because of Pythagoras, the hypotenuse length is the square root of 10. The character is 12 foot away, 13 foot away, somewhere in that ballpark. How did I get to that number? Well, it's basically just bad maths. It's not even maths. All I'm doing is I'm making a narrative decision and I'm making the call and I'm going with it. What I generally do is I take the distance away, if I even have as physical a distance as a distance in the game in the first place. But if they are 10 foot away, it's 10 base feet that their character is away. If they are 6 foot or less in the air, as a matter of fact, if they're 7 foot or less in the air, then they are not considered to be, in my opinion, out of the range of a ground-based unit. So they still occupy that space directly in range of a terrestrial-based individual. Yes, if they're a gnome, they don't have a reach of 7 foot with a sword above their head. That may get to 6 foot, but those are special cases. A human with a sword should be able to easily strike something that's 7, maybe even 8 foot in the air or lower. So I ignore that. So it's only when they're above 7 foot that I then start to calculate. And the calculation is very easy. If it's 7 to, say, 15 feet away, as well as 10 foot base, well, then I just add 2 or 3 foot to that 10 feet. So it's 13 feet away. If it's 20 foot and above, I'll add 5, 6, so that it starts to become a number that sits somewhere in the distance directly away and the distance directly above. It's a fudged combination therein. Yes, it's not true mathematics, absolutely. But have you taken into account the curvature of the Earth, etc., 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 all that rubbish that just slows down the game? You don't need to do it unless, of course, you like doing it, in which case, knock yourself out. But again, I don't think you need to. Remember that frustration angle that the players will have when you're sitting there quietly square rooting everything to figure out the actual hypotenuse distance, so that your character can go, well, my range is 30 foot. Is it 30 foot away? Well, actually, it's 4 hours later, 28 feet, so I can hit it. Yes. Just make the call and move on. Whatever system works for you that comes up with a number that seems reasonable, go with it. Now, I'm doing the exact same video for players tomorrow where you will hear me say, let the GM work out the maths and accept it. Don't fight back, because all you're doing is you're fighting over an imaginary position of an imaginary creature. Don't do it. Just move on. Avoid that frustration. What you do need to do, though, as a good GM, is you need to figure out a way that the terrestrial-based players can engage with your aerial creatures if they're smart. So if they're out in the open field and an aerial creature attacks them, they're in trouble. There's no doubt about it. If they don't have ranged counterattacks, they are in trouble. But there is nothing stopping you from describing that the players make a survival check or a nature check or a whatever check your system happens to use to spot that a few feet away there's a ravine, and the ravine is pockmarked with caves that this watercourse that used to run through the ravine has made. If the characters then jump into the ravine and hide underneath the overhang of those caves that have been wrought by the water, then the aerial creatures have to land to engage them. So if you give the players an opportunity to be able to manipulate the flying creature to come down to them, do so. Especially if the party has no ranged attacks. And if they've only got 1 out of 5 characters who has a ranged attack, give them that opportunity. Let them find some trees that they can hide underneath that cause the creature to have to move around or to come down to their area. Let them find caves, let them find overhangs. However you want to play it, let them have the opportunity to nullify that aerial combat if they choose to change the positioning of that combat. They might not. They might just stand there and bemoan their fate. That then is their choice. But you have given them the opportunity to evade and change the nature of the combat to bring it down to their level. Again, it's avoiding that frustration that players will have when encountering an airborne creature that they can't engage in. Now, falling, we expect that there should be falling if the PCs are flying. We expect creatures to fall. There are very few game systems out there that I have encountered that have really captivated my imagination in terms of falling. Now, there's a reason for this. Physics. Physics is a horrendous thing on planet Earth, and it is frequently ignored by people on this planet when they do stupid things. Constantly we hear of skydivers who've leapt voluntarily out of planes, tried to open their parachutes, realized that their parachute has failed because their wife wants the inheritance, and they plunge towards the planet's surface. We don't often hear of the gory outcomes. We just hear that a parachutist died in an extreme sporting accident. We don't hear that they hit the tarmac and exploded sideways, spilling out their internal organs in all different directions with their lower extremities bursting out of their buttocks in this horrid display of pink flailing tubes whilst their stomach erupted from their mouths and their eyeballs exploded. We don't hear that sort of thing for good reason. It's not very nice. What we do hear, though, is frequently of these idiots who've jumped out of aeroplanes, and if you're a skydiver, great, good for you. Enjoy it. If you are a skydiver, great stuff. Who fall out of these planes, jump out of these planes, fall to the planet, bump into a tree or two, and land on terra firma. Alive. Somehow they avoided taking massive damage. And this is cited as being why there's a limit to the amount of damage that people should take when they are falling from an object of great height in a game system. Sure, the 1 in 10,000 who jump out of planes every single day is the one who managed to survive. I don't think it should be a factor of how much damage the individual took. I think it should be a percentage chance of survival rather than anything else. But the game system is the game system, so you've got to use it however it describes it. What you do need to take into account is how do your characters prevent death from falling. So once they have fallen off of the magic carpet, can they cast Featherfall? How long does it take the character to fall 600 feet? Well, theoretically, it should take them 6 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't know. It's up to you. Terminal velocity, of course, determines a specific value, but that's neither here nor there. We're not using physics really in this entire discussion on falling. So how they fall and what they can do whilst they are falling is very important. Can they cast spells? This is up to you. I can't say yes or no because, well, the tension is there. It's for you to use. In my game, ships can fly faster than people can fall and can scoop the person up so they can come down, match velocity, get the person to land just gently on the deck and then sail off into the sunset. That doesn't work, really. It would be incredibly difficult to do that. Incredibly difficult to do it, but it can be done because I don't want my players to have their characters die because they made one silly little dexterity check that failed, so they fell off the ship. Splat, you're dead, start again. I don't like that, so I need to give solutions. I need to be more flexible with those characters. If they jump from one creature to another creature in midair and they don't land very well, they slam into the creature, do they take lateral speed damage from one side to the other? Well, you could fudge it and give them some damage if you really chose to, but is it critical or is it dramatic? Is it narrative? I usually err on the side of narrative, well, obviously. So that is something that you need to take into consideration. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning all of these things without actually giving you any solutions is because you need to decide what solution you're going to use. And then you need to implement it and tell your players. There are a few systems, like I said, that really handle aerial combat, aerial collisions, aerial damage very well because it's such a tricky space and it should technically be deadly. But we don't want that. We want people to be able to fall out of a plane, grab onto the tip of a building, and somehow not rip their arms out of their sockets because physics. We want the drama, we want that dynamic space, and we want to make it fun. So those are the things that I look at when I look at flying in particular. If a character has got flying, I need to figure out how to get them missions. I need to figure out how to keep them as part of the party. I need to figure out where they can fly and what are the ramifications of people who see that they can fly. What do the locals think when they see this flying person? Do they just go, oh, yeah, I would fly, but my arms get tired. Who knows what they say? You do, and you've got to figure out how they're going to react to it. Is it seen as a magical, mystical power? Are they seen as demons that arrive on weird flying wings? Or is it just something that happens and they see that every now and again and it's, oh yeah, those are the jet setters. Those are the fancy blokes, those are. You can tell that they're proper heroes. They fly. They don't ride on, magical mounts anymore. No, they just fly. Something for you to think about. So flying is a very complicated issue, or not. And I choose to not make it a complicated issue. I choose to make it a fun space that the players can enjoy, where, yes, they can fall to their deaths if they fail sufficiently a number of dice rolls, which really means that, well, the dice and luck and everything that was thrown at it really just said that they should fall to their death. That's how I play it. I don't go for any of this more mechanical stuff because it just slows the game down and it creates frustration. It can give an incredible sense of drama and action. It can bring that. What a wonderful thing to have a battle amongst the clouds where these thin planks and there's this risk of death. But there needs to be a risk of saving as well. Anyway, those are my thoughts on flying. Thanks to Michael Kessevan from Ask a Pathfinder. If you head on over to Facebook and you search Ask a Pathfinder, you'll find his site. He talks about all things Pathfinder, of course, all the mechanics, the minutiae, and how to do things. And flying is something that he requested that I look into from my own unique perspective. Of course, Pathfinder has got rules and systems on flying. and Michael will be handling those, I'm sure, in future episodes. But he suggested this topic, so thanks to Michael for handling this, for asking for it anyway. And until next time, hit that like button if you like the video, hit that subscribe button if you want me to make more videos, and of course you can always leave your comments. How do you handle flying within your campaign, and the ramifications of falling, and the frustration that players have that comes along with having to deal with something that is flying? How do you handle it? What do you do? Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.